Hi everyone, welcome to episode 105 of the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. Thank you again for joining this episode. It's going to be a little bit different. I'm changing things up and I'm going to talk about that, but then go ahead and talk about the different news and events that's happening that affect our practices. So it's been, the 105th episode. It's been a long time, and I've attracted a lot of listeners, different types of listeners. Now there's the primary goal, the type of listener I was looking for when I started, and which still is, are people that are actually practicing in the immigration field. And that primarily has turned out to be people that are immigration lawyers practicing, people that are law students or recent graduates getting involved in immigration law or wanting to get involved in immigration law. There's people that are existing immigration attorneys that are employees of different firms, not on their own. There's people that have been practicing for decades and are just interested in this practice field and how things are changing and want to hear more about it. Because when you are an immigration attorney, you're always a person who likes being an immigration attorney in particular. You always like talking about it and the facts and all the legal issues that are going on. There's also a lot of people that are tired of being in their own practice area, what they used to be doing or are still doing, and they want to switch. And they hear this podcast and they hear how excited I am to be an immigration attorney and talk all day about what I do and do it and everything, that they're excited about getting involved. So that was the audience I wanted. And now there's people who are paralegals, legal assistants. There are people that are non-law related, that are just interested in this topic, who do listen and stuff. And so they're also listeners and they enjoy it as well. But that's the group I was always primarily motivated to help and guide and provide information to. And it turns out most of the people who do contact me are from these groups. So one thing you've probably been noticing in the last year or so, me talking about, is the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox and what that means. Now, it's been kind of vague right now. It's been a location where I put the podcast. If you go to immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com, there's constantly updated news events. I have videos of tips and guidance that I have on there. There's a glossary of all the immigration terms and forms and stuff like that. But there's a masterclass training page that hasn't been it's been hidden or hasn't been accessible, but now I'm beginning to put that out in some sort of training material. And I want to start by talking about that first before getting into the news. I'm reading one book right now, and it's called, it's by a woman named Jill Abramson. She's the former editor of the New York Times. It's called Merchants of Truth: Inside the News Revolution. And so what her thoughts are, she goes through the history in the last 15 to 20 years of the evolution of news in America, where the New York Times and the LA Times and the Washington Post and all these kind of groups and television broadcasters were dominating things, to looking at how things like Vice News, BuzzFeed, Facebook are really changing the nature of how news operates, and it's really bankrupting a lot of the news stations and stuff. So when you see the differences that are happening, the changes that are happening on the internet, this is something that's not just affecting the news or things, like classified ads or aren't in newspapers anymore, but they're free online on Craigslist and that kind of stuff. It's something that's affecting the legal field. And I've been talking about this before, but everyone knows the changes that are happening in all sorts of different places, whether it's the California bar trying to let unlicensed, legal providers online do things, whether it's just people moving in and providing guidance online by doing like videos that are non-lawyers and trying to get in on it. These are former notarios that are moving into the digital age. All this stuff are happening. It's affecting our practices. So it's something that you can't, in the next few years, do the same thing immigration lawyers had been doing, which is just suit up, go to the office, do volume, and whatever happens and go out. There's consequences for bad work. People leave bad reviews. There's consequences in that people will try to study on their own and do things on their own, or they'll find alternative avenues to do things. And I've never been a techie myself. Of all my friends, I'm always the last one. For example, I had the clamshell phone longer than anybody. I was the last one to do the switch. Just even learning how to do this and the technology to set up this podcast and recording it and the video on YouTube, which I put, learning how to go on LinkedIn and create profiles. All this stuff takes me much longer than other people. It's not natural to me and I don't really enjoy it per se, but I appreciate the importance of it because it is the future. And being adaptable is the most important thing to do to stay, because I really believe that we're in a changing environment right now, and those who are able to adapt will succeed in there, and those that are not will not. And you've invested so much time, so much money, and your future in this. You have care about the people you're helping. If you don't adapt, you're not going to change with the times. And I believe you can adapt because you have what it takes in you to do it, and you have the education knowledge, which is really the hard part. by taking the tools that are out there and getting the guidance needed, you can overcome that and live the life you want to live and do the good work that you want to do. And the nature of the work is much different than what it was before. You should be able to strive to achieve the advocacy results that you want, to live the lifestyle you want with the money you want, while at the same time moving things forward in your life and the life of people around you for that vision that you have, for that destiny that you want to establish. That should be something that's doable, and it is doable. And especially with the way things online work, if you have a strategy to move it forward, it is possible. It's a blueprint I've developed for myself over the last few years, a trial and error, and that's what the Immigration Toolbox is, of how to develop the business to a point where it operates at a low overhead, but it's able to give you the freedom and the lifestyle you need to do greater things. Not just be the old school lawyer that's stuck doing one thing, because when you're doing that one thing, there's always a risk that something comes up and it takes away from you. Competition comes up, or technology comes up, or all sorts of other issues that could prevent you from keeping that going. So having taking part in a blueprint, having a strategy to shift, and having a goal in mind of how you want to live your life is really important. And that, where does that come from? For me, it's a long story of my life, and I could describe that, and it all has an effect. But I'll just fast forward it. When I went to law school, I thought as soon as you get into law school, it's a given that you're going to get six figures and you graduate. When I got into law school, I saw quickly that wasn't happening. And I mean, first and foremost, I was not really satisfied with, and I realized what a lawyer does and the consequence of the work they do and the lifestyle they have to live. So very quickly, after scoring very high grades in like the first semester of law school, it quickly dropped because I realized this wasn't something I want to do. Law was disappointing in the sense that criminal law was all over the place. If you have money, you win. Whether it was real estate law, that was booming in the 2000s, and I graduated in 2009, which crashed. Whether it was constitutional law, which is done completely differently at the whim of justices. All this was so disappointing and so disheartening that all the motivations and idealistic ideas I had about going to law school disappeared. And then in 2009, when I graduated, it was the bottom of the job market. It was a great crash. People were out of work, and by that point, I was not in the top 5%. I would say I'm the bottom 95%. And so, because I'm not pushing it, pursuing it, and not having the passion for it, when I did try to find jobs, it quickly didn't resolve, and nothing came about it. So I spent a period of 2 years after graduating where I was just down. And I realized I just spent all this time and money doing something I don't want to do, that I don't now want to do. But I took that around and took the education, and I started investing in the stock market, investing in commodities, currencies, and it was a good time to do that. And I did very well for myself, but 2 years go by, I made a good amount of money, but I was still dissatisfied because all I did all day was reading, studying, and staying with myself and not really having relationships, not really advocating and doing all the great things that a lawyer could do with the power and education that they have. To be able to succeed in a financial market on my own, I had to study and be on top of things on a 24/7 basis. It didn't give me time to do anything. And I realized all the money you could make in that route was limited because it limited the amount of time you had to do other kind of things. So it wasn't a lifestyle I wanted. Eventually I made the switch, and I found somebody who could help me learn immigration law. I started at a solo law firm, and it was a great experience because it taught me how to practice immigration law, and that's what's so important. It's such a beautiful field. It's complicated, but it's fun. There's strategy involved. And by learning how to be an immigration attorney, I became very satisfied, but the job, first and foremost, frankly, was not well paying, as most employees of immigration law firms know. We get paid the lowest salary there is in all the legal fields that there are. And then when you're an employee, you have no control over the caseload that you can get. I'm sure everyone listening here who's had either worked at a firm or who's had trouble with firm money and they need to take on cases, how dissatisfying, how frustrating it is to take on a case that you don't want just because you're forced to do it, because your employer tells you to, or because you have to. And that was very dissatisfying as well, doing cases I didn't want to do, where I didn't think they should move forward, I didn't like the clients, and at the same time not making enough money to be independent, having a difficult time getting clients. I got almost no clients during that period of time I was there, and not having that independence of knowing, what I could do, the things I want to do in life, because my time was controlled by another person. So I had no independence or freedom. 2 years of this goes by, and I just couldn't take it anymore. I wanted to live, a bigger lifestyle. I wanted to, bring those things I loved and the passion I had for to fruition. And I couldn't do that in the system I was, but I'd never brought in a single client. I was still an intermediate at this point at immigration law, but I just wanted to control my destiny. So I threw away that life and I started a new life. Very scary kind of thing to do, which is a big reason a lot of people don't do it. But I launched myself in my own firm, and quickly I said, I got to know this law. So I started studying the INA, the FAM, all these things where when I had an employer, I kind of would just learn from previous files or ask the boss. But I went and learned for myself by reading the CFR, Code of Federal Regulations, the FAM, the Adjudicator's Field Manual, the old CBP manual, and just reaching out and finding connections and networks to the immigration law community so I could ask them questions, getting involved with AILA, and 100 more things where I really learned the law. But no one's there telling me these things existed. I used to hunt the internet trying to find AEO decisions so I could study them. Now realizing the AEO publishes all the decisions on their website. So every time I'd find someone on their website who published an AEO decision, I was so excited, whereas they're all right there where I could read them. Or a myriad of other things about the law that I needed to learn for myself by reading the statute. I mean, as simple as INA 245, where you got to really know how the nuances of each aspect works. So I learned the law myself because I had the time and I had the focus and I knew it was important. But then I had to dive deep to get clients. So I had to study every book I could. And even today I study a lot of books. I mean, right here I got, .com Secrets, Hit Makers, The Science of Popularity in Age of Distraction, all these other marketing books that I read on a day-to-day basis. Even at this point where my marketing is so strong, I still got to keep on top of it, but it's a pleasure to do it. And that has boosted things. That's turned things around where I'm really happy to wake up in the morning and go to work. I'm really happy to work with the clients I want to work with. I'm really excited about how much money I'm making. And most importantly, I have a lifestyle where I work on these law stuff, the firm stuff, on a part-time basis, but I'm still using my legal education to do fun things like teaching at Loyola Law School, being a professor at Pepperdine Law School, doing the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox, doing these videos, doing advocacy for immigration attorneys. I'm even starting a trade association pretty soon. I'll be talking more about that, but I've been able to advocate and be a mentor to dozens of students, dozens of other attorneys, find jobs for over 50 people, and really take this legal education and the power that it has to really make a shift during the groups I want to help and I can focus on. And I'm sure if you're listening, you have advocacy that you want to do, whether it be for LGBT groups. If you, for example, want to help the LGBT community, you can have a practice like mine where you're working part-time, but then you develop clients in the LGBT community and you could push their interests and let people know what things hurt them, because the immigration community, the immigrant community touches them on every aspect of society. So you get clients from that, then you can help them at the next level, not just by getting their visas or their green cards. You can take the next level and help them in other aspects of their lives and their networking. And that also works to market your firm as well, to get clients, to create the cash flow in the business, the law firm, to sustain other kinds of operations and eventually create multiple streams of revenue. So you're not just practice as a law firm, which is just one thing, but you could do partner up with your old clients and do businesses with them, create other marketing opportunities, business opportunities that come from it, and not have the law firm suck all your time and your attention, because it generates enough money and you have the tools to get updated on the news and everything, so you don't have to spend the time reading a whole book when you could get a great synopsis online through a video or the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox. These are kind of cool things I did and I'm really interested in, and whenever I'm talking to people, they're always amazed how much time I have to post all these videos up, to do all these interviews and sustain myself. But I do, and I've been a six-figure law firm for a while now, and a strong six figures, and doing it all by myself. And the only reason I would hire staff at this point, which I may, is because I want to do even more videos and stuff, because it's so much fun and I need someone to help, just with even editing and with taking some calls every once in a while. But I even now I don't need it. I'm able to sustain it and have a good lifestyle, a big house, and be with my family and see my kids grow up on a day-to-day basis. And that's something that's so important that people need to do and need to strategize for, so they're ready for that, to enjoy life and enjoy the work that they do, not just the hustle of the 9-to-5 and grind of being an immigration attorney. To kind of go back to where I started from, when I'm thinking, the next 100 episodes, what's the goals and stuff, I'm still going to be doing a lot of interviews. That's something I have a lot of fun for, because it really connects me with the community. At this point, I'm talking to behind the scenes 10 to 15 immigration lawyers and people related to the immigration field every week. And not only does this help with kind of business development and marketing and people send me clients, More importantly to me, it really helps solidify connections across the country to help this movement I'm creating for people, especially immigration lawyers, to take control of their lives and take control of their practices so they have the additional time to do true advocacy. No more is it needed that you just, if you want to do pro bono work, that you have to work for a pro bono company. No more is it needed that if you're trying to make a living, you have to kill yourself working from morning till night at a law firm. You can merge these two very easily and have the monetary gain that you need as an attorney, but also do the community work that you need. And that's so important. These go hand in hand to be fully satisfied as a human being, especially in the immigration law field, especially in the law field, and especially for any kind of professional. And so the interviews are still going to happen. I'm going to do less tips and instructions on the podcast itself. Those are going to be behind the subscription system for the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox, which I'm going to describe. So the tips with regards to how to do business development and practice, and also for the immigration law field itself. And this takes the shape of these masterclass forms I'm putting. It's a recording that'll be available on the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox so that you can listen. And it's always going to talk about one business development tool and also one area of law. Both at a beginner level, so people are just starting can pick it up, but then taking that at the more advanced level with more nuanced details, so people that are beginners could jump in and get really good information, but people that have been practicing will still have stuff to gain, and they'll recap the beginner stuff as well, so it's good for them. Then with the masterclass system, there's follow-up emails you can send to me, so at the next session I have, I could talk about those questions that came up before moving on to the next topic. So in the past episodes, I've done websites and SEO, LinkedIn. This is for business development, and on the other end for immigration law stuff, I've talked about the 90-day rule, INA 245K, the visa bulletin, and CISPA, and how they work together. Because these are issues I've seen, these particular points, and just there's 100 more. I could do this forever, where practitioners don't know, are not comfortable with, and need help on these particular topics. So I talk about what I've learned from all the free time I have for studying immigration law. And finally, there's going to be a daily tips system that I'm doing a recording every day. That's 2 or 3 minutes. That talks about what I learned that day that helped my business or helped my appreciation, understanding of immigration law. So this is going to be the core of the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox. There's a lot more stuff coming, but I'm going to build on that because I want to have really high quality content, CLEs that are like a game changer kind of CLE. Not the ones that you just go to and you listen for an hour. You might be on your computer, talking about other things. Things that will just grab your attention from beginning to end because they'll really hold your hand and take you through it. That stuff's going to be happening, and I'm working with other attorneys to help me with that. But really the core of the system right now is this masterclass, mastermind group, as well as the daily immigration toolbox tips system. So to access this, you just email me first at info@Immigration Lawyers Toolbox. There's going to be an introductory rate because I'm getting things started. There's going to be a lot more material coming, really hardcore material coming. So the price is going to double, triple, most likely at least. And so I'm going to start with a monthly system of just $15 a month to get access to this subscription system. Now, when it comes to like the master classes, the last 2 recordings are going to be posted. So every time a new one comes up, it's going to push out the old one, as well as the daily immigration toolbox tips. Those are going to be the last 15. So every day goes forward, an old one gets pushed out. So that's why you got to be part of the subscription to keep it moving and listen to them and keep a momentum going, because it's important to have a group that's engaged, and we could have a partnership that's across the country with lawyers that are part of the Immigration Laws Toolbox that are on the same page. So they'll know each other, they'll know there's other people in the country we rely on. If we have an internal communication system, a page, a directory, so we know there's people involved. So if I have a case across the country, I could go to this person and contact them from our directory because I know they're engaged in the practice of immigration law. They're involved in the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox, means they care, and they're connected with me. I could talk with them and keep everyone on the same page and really push each other up. That's the main thing. It's all about being a mentality of abundance, of holding each other's hands and bringing each other up, rather than scarcity, famine, thinking that I gotta hide this information, that information. If you listened 105 episodes now, it's the 105th one, so 104 episodes, I've never been shy to tell people what I do. If you listen to the tips on LinkedIn, I never shy to withhold information about the State Department's doing or what my practice is doing, because it's never hurt me, it's only helped me. I have referrals from across the country now that trust me and they send it to me just because I'm so forthcoming. So that's the kind of system I want to continue developing and really take it to the next level, do something that's never been done before. So to get involved with that, just email me at info@immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com and I can fill you in on that information so that you can start living the life you want to live and going towards your destiny, your goals, and not just repeating the same thing, going through the motions of going to the office, going to EOIR, going to asylum office, which are really important. But then, how do we solve the issue that there's people that need so much asylum? How do we solve the issue that, people from Central America are coming here? That's not something an immigration lawyer in the practice of your art could solve. That's a much bigger thing. But if you have the money and the time, you could dive deep and change that game. And that's what you need to do as lawyers. Develop the skills and the finances and the cash flow and the connected networks to be able to resolve these larger scale issues. And that's something really only lawyers could do. That's why so many people in public office are lawyers. We have a strategic mind. We have an understanding that not everyone could do. Doctors are so caught up in the body, but lawyers are in the mind. And as a group of people, we always have to work on the mind, the story, and how we influence each other. And that's something you could do with the power of an immigration attorney. So I want to help you achieve that goal. So having said that, let's get it started and move on to the news. Welcome to the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. I am the host, Attorney John Khosravi, and I practice U.S. immigration law exclusively. For more information about the program, please visit www.immigrationlawyerspodcast.com. Please note that this recording is informational only and does not constitute legal advice. Please consult with a licensed attorney for specific legal guidance that suits your case. Also, this recording is copyrighted and written permission is required for rebroadcasting. For more information about me, please visit www.jqqlaw.com. So I'm going to be going over the various agencies that I usually deal with and things that have popped up in the last month or so. And there's a good amount of stuff to talk about. It's always so interesting what's going on. Frustrating, obviously. It's rarely good news, but the more you're ahead of the ball and you see these things coming from the agencies, the more prepared you can be. So I like talking about that stuff. One of the most interesting things is the addition of the information related to social media of applicants for visas, whether it's the DS-160 or the DS-260 for non-immigrant or immigrant visas. The social media requirement is very interesting because they list about 12 or something like that social media accounts that they want you to reveal about yourself, your username, so they can look it up. Now there's a bazillion almost social media accounts, so who knows, but they're looking for the main ones. And it's really interesting because it lists ones that are Chinese and Russian that they use primarily that we're not even aware of as Americans. But there's two aspects. One is a lot of times my clients right now, because like my Russian clients, for example, they have Russian acrylic, I think it is. Cyrillic, I'm pronouncing it complete wrong probably. But how they type is completely different. And the State Department didn't take that into consideration. So my clients email me their usernames. It's all in Russian or Ukrainian script. And I can't input it on there. It just turns into like question marks or something like that. So now we're forced to just put the name in there. And I type in, but it's in Russian, and then for example, in a case in Russian I'm doing, when I'm submitting the sale documents by mail because they haven't made the online system for Moscow yet, I'm including a letter that says this is the Russian script version of it. The computer system at DS-260 doesn't allow us to input it, but we're not withholding information. Don't accuse us of misrepresentation. You just didn't create a proper computer system, which is really funny because the other pages of the DS-260 do allow you to type in foreign script, but the username on those don't. So I just translate what their name would be in English, even though on those websites their names are in their own language. So these are the headaches that happen from that. But from a marketing perspective, there's a list of the major social media platforms. Now, there's a lot of social media business to get off Instagram, off LinkedIn, off Facebook, off Twitter, off Pinterest, and all this kind of stuff. But if you want to take it to the next level, those are the websites that look to be dominant in those cultures for Russia and China. There's YK, I think, and Weibo, all these kind of things. Where if you want to market to those areas, you got to get on those platforms. You have to know the languages, but if you have an assistant or you're from one of those countries and speak that language, that's where you want to be in to be able to market and get clients off social media, off foreign accounts, because for sure it's going to be less competitive than Facebook or Twitter is going to be, and probably buying ad space on there is going to be less expensive. So that's a very cool thing you can get started, and you can take this negative of just having this requirement for social media, learn from it, and benefit your practice in that way by increasing your business development. Now, the Federal Bar Immigration Conference happened a few months ago, a month or two ago, and they talked about an issue there that one of our colleagues posted about the Department of State shutting down the the immigration attorney email system that they have. Apparently someone said that it's not fully shut off, still works, but personally when I use it, they just come back and say don't use it, go to this other website. It's the template page that exists where everyone can access. So I've been using that. It's been slowed down a lot. I've had to email multiple times for them to get something going, not email, but input my information in the system. Now this colleague did say that if they see there's an attorney on record there and you identify the attorney because it's asked for, then they'll expedite that request because they'll see it's an attorney. But who knows? Right now the system is just continuous mess, and at this point it seems intentional that they're slowing it down. But that is a problem that's happening. Now looking to the State Department's breakdown for the visa bulletin, there's been a lot of interesting things that have happened. So obviously in the family-based preference category, the F2A has created a current system. So there's still a backlog in the date of filing, but the final action date is current. So it's kind of weird how that processing is going to happen because usually the final action date is behind. But USCIS has said on its website that they're accepting the final action date specifically for F2A, spouses and children, minor children of lawful permanent residents, even though in general they're accepting the date of filing for other adjustment of status stuff. But if you look at the visa bulletin for employment-based categories, huge backlogs came around. So EB1 has just gone pushed back to 2016, which is horrible. There's retrogression and things being backed up for EB5 in India and Vietnam. It's just getting worse and worse. And right now we have this regulation that got passed in Congress about country limits, removing them. There's a lot of people that are really excited about that because there's a huge backlog for Chinese and Indian people, and that is harsh and unfair. But the reality is if they remove these limits but don't increase visa issuance or count visas differently, as such as like just having the head count of the principal being used instead of the whole family, essentially employment-based categories is going to be a Chinese and Indian-based visa completely, and it's going to shut out the entire world from coming here. So that's going to affect our practices drastically if you're doing employment-based practice, because there's immediately going to be a multi-year backlog, which makes fine for employment-based kind of ridiculous for a lot of cases. As well as if you don't have an in on these particular categories or particular countries in China or India, all of a sudden your case backlog is going to, your EB case is going to disappear, because from everywhere in the world, from high population countries in Brazil, Russia, Iran, Europe, these employment base is just not going to happen. So it's a really messy situation. It's not very well thought out how they're dealing with it, but that's a problem. Now there was a colleague who posted that they had submitted a I-864 based on assets of the foreign nationals, the parents of a U.S. citizen, and they're from a Central Asian country. And they had $1 million in cash assets, and the embassy there still denied it for public charge grounds. So be very careful. I don't want to ever use assets when doing consular processing based family cases, because the consulate is very strict. You want to have a W-2 employee be the sponsor. Anything that goes away from that risks being denied at the embassy for public charge. So it's a very messed up situation. Speaking of public charge, the idea of the form I-865 is coming back again. So I-865 is the sponsor's change of address notification, similar to AR-11 for the applicant themselves or lawful permanent resident or any alien in the U.S. The I-865 is a paper-based application that you mail in. I've used to mail this in, but I had problems a couple years ago where I sent it to USCIS. They forwarded it to the Department of State, and then the Department of State sent it back to me saying, we don't know why you're sending this. So after I got that garbage, I didn't file it anymore. But President Trump is cracking down, saying they're going to start looking for sponsors because they're looking at public charge and people have used public services. So that's something you probably have to get involved in and get your clients to do on Form I-865. Now, the topic of travel ban has been popping up again because, the same issues exist, but there's a lot more lawsuits about it. One fact that came to mind from a case is there's a rule that says if you had a visa at the time the travel ban came to effect, it doesn't apply to you. But there's certain countries that get single entry visas. For example, Iran, that's on a travel ban list. And if you had a single entry visa, as soon as you enter, it was invalidated. So just by having a visa during that time, it doesn't necessarily mean you're waived by it, because it gets canceled once you use it. So that's a weird phenomenon. It's not a multi-entry visa, so that becomes a problem. Now, there's been approvals that have been randomly popping up from colleagues who say that the client just went to an interview, child of a U.S. citizen, spouse of a green card holder, and even without administrative processing, 2 or 3 days later, the case was approved in those embassies that Iranians are supposed to go to. So that's kind of crazy, unexpected, and just unreliable that all of a sudden these cases will get approved, and then there's people who have clients 3 years waiting and nothing happening. The cases had their interview before the travel ban, admin processing was happening 6 months, a year, and all of a sudden a travel ban comes and still nothing has happened, and the embassies won't respond to us. It's a very, very horrible situation that's going on with people's lives. But again, there's mandamus lawsuits happening. They have been successful, but from what I hear from colleagues, the government is now pushing back and calling out and trying to argue defenses toward the mandamus, consular non-reviewability, all that kind of stuff. So there's a big fight going on. Now, Ayla did have a consular tour in Berlin, Germany, at the U.S. Embassy there in April. And just one note that came from that is the U.S. and Canada do fully share their information with regards to visa issuance and travel. So if a foreign national goes to the embassy in Berlin and wants to do, for example, a tourist visa, the U.S. has access in their computers to see if they've been denied a Canadian visa before, and obviously that will have a negative effect on the mindset of the officer adjudicating that case because they saw that there was a denial. But apparently Mexico is not sharing these denial issues with the U.S. So that's just some information stuff going on. If someone has a Canadian denial, that always increases the chances of their visa getting denied. Now, the favorite topic of the 90-day rule, which stresses out so many of my colleagues, is back up because they've been constantly changing this and adding language to it in the Foreign Affairs Manual. One thing that they added a bunch of new language, which doesn't make much sense really. I didn't really enjoy big parts of it, but I want to read that just so you have an idea of what's happening. The 90-day rule being if you come to the U.S. and do some inconsistent conduct, go back, the consular officer next time around could accuse you of violating your misrepresentation or fraud. Now, USCIS does not go by this. This is not a USCIS standard, nor is it supposed to be. But things they've added in the language says, like for example, you may presume that the applicant made a willful misrepresentation, i.e., you may presume that the applicant's representation about engaging in only status-compliant activities were willful misrepresentation of their true intentions. But you must provide the applicant with the opportunity to rebut the presumptions of misrepresentations by verbally presenting the applicant with your factual findings as to why you believe he or she is ineligible under 6C1. So technically they're supposed to verbally and orally tell the person why they're saying this. They can't just say whatever reason. Now whether they're going to do that or not, who knows? We can always try to challenge them, which is going to be difficult. But have clients prepared for this kind of stuff. If you think there's some sort of fact in their history that could come up, have their answers ready. Talk to them about what this means so they don't go there and say some things that don't make any sense. Now, there's other parts in here I don't like. Now, the previous adjustments to this that said that if you enter the U.S. and get married, and the end is an important part, you take up residence in the U.S., that's what's misrepresentation. But if you, for example, come here, get married, and leave, and then wait out for consular processing, that in itself doesn't become a problem. Now, if you had gotten a visa interview beforehand and said, I don't have any relationship in the U.S., then immediately come here, get married, then go to consular processing, they'll say, well, your relationship existed, and you didn't tell us. That could be a problem. But here they make a note, and what I don't like about this note, I'll explain. So their thing is if you get married and take up residence, but they go and say, no, to establish that an applicant took up residence in the United States before or after marrying a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident, post may take into account whether the applicant signed a long-term lease, in the applicant's name. So this is problematic for me because a lot of times in the U.S., if you're coming to visit someone, let's say I have an apartment, I'm an American, I have an apartment, I have my girlfriend or my parents or something who visit every 6 months, and when they come, they stay for 30 days at a time. Technically, according to landlord-tenant law in many states and many counties, you have to add that person to the lease because at that point, once they stay over a few days, they're not a guest anymore, they're considered a tenant. So just as a requirement for the sake of satisfying the landlord, you may be required to add them to the long-term lease that you have, but it's not necessarily an indication that they're residing here. They're just hanging out with family. I mean, a tourist visa, a B1, B2 is 6 months. So if your family come when you had a kid and they want to see the grandchild and they want to stay for 4 months and the landlord forces them to add to the lease, that's not an indicator of residing in the U.S. That's just an indicator of long-term tourist presence or B1, B2 presence. So that's a very problematic language as an example they put there. That has to be removed. It's just factually inaccurate. They shouldn't have that in there. They further go on to note that simply filing for a change of status or adjustment of status is not in and of itself sufficient to support presumption of misrepresentation under 90-day rule. So that's good they say that, but again, it goes to the inconsistency of all this because they keep pushing that you do something wrong in 9 days, you're bad, but then they say, well, it doesn't necessarily mean that, and it creates huge confusion. This, as a document, as a manual, this is a very badly written manual because it doesn't give proper guidance into what the rule is. And so by adding this new language, it just made things more confusing. They say, moreover, if an alien engages in the activity for which he or she was admitted, such as to study on an F1 student visa, but also engages in unauthorized work without seeking an employment authorization document, EAD, that is insufficient to justify presumption of a misrepresentation. So it's like, it's going to confuse the hell out of these officers because of the way it's written. Now at the end they also say, you must provide the alien the opportunity to rebut by verbally presenting the applicant with your factual findings. So that's very important. They're trying to give help a little bit, but that's something that we really have to tell our clients to be prepared for if they're doing consular processing, because these kind of issues exist. So I'm going to move on to USCIS and just some headaches I had, examples of it I had these last few weeks. I had a case where I filed an I-751. There was issues with them not mailing me stuff and somehow not knowing my address is and mailing me a letter saying we don't know what your address is, which doesn't make any sense. But after 3 months, we got an online notification that it was approved and the document was sent to us. And I said, what's an I-751? How the world is that going to get approved? But they said wait 30 days for the document to come before contacting us. So we waited 30 days. The 31st day, I went through our online system saying we didn't receive anything. And the response within 24 hours was, your case is within regular processing time. So I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Your website says that the case is approved and documents issued. Is that potentially an RFE? I mean, I got to know this. I don't want to miss a deadline. So this is before July 4th. It's on July 3rd. I called them up at like 12:01 in the afternoon, spent an hour on hold with them. And then they say that I talked to the first officer and she was fully understanding, saying, yeah, that didn't make any sense. And she couldn't go in the system because we had just made a recent status request and she's now blocked out. I have to send you to a secondary officer, but they've all left for the day because it's 4th of July. And they're not going to be here on Friday because they want to be at the long weekend, so call back on Monday. So I'm like, okay, I just spent an hour on the phone, worthless. So I tried calling back on Monday multiple times throughout the day, and they say the phone line is just so busy that we can't get anybody right now. So I'm like, oh, great. So now I have to spend an hour on that. Again, Tuesday I call. I'm on the phone for an hour until I get hold of somebody. They say, okay, we'll send you to a secondary officer. They put me on that recording system that says, okay, if you want us to call back, say your name. I say my name, and they say our current wait time for a callback is 480 minutes. And I quickly was trying to do my math of how many hours that is. So 6, 12, 18, 24, 36, 42, 40. All of a sudden that's like 7 hours. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. They're not going to call me at night. They're probably not going to call me tomorrow now. And it's just extra frustrating because it's impossible. I mean, imagine if you were a person, just getting a hold of somebody on the phone requires so many tricks. If you're just a pro se applicant, you're not going to be able to do this, especially with this craziness that they put out there. So I just thought, okay, I'll just call back tomorrow. Within 3 or 4 hours, an officer did call, and they told me, no, the case is still pending. The online system is completely wrong, but don't worry, we're going to do it. I'm like, could you send something to me by email to confirm this? I don't want to come back later and say, we sent you an RFE and the case is denied. And so they're like, no, this is recorded. Do you have this number? I'm like, I hope so. But it's just extremely frustrating to do that. Cost the client, extra money. And I didn't charge him for this because, I have a hard time charging for these extra times and stuff like that. But it's something I'm going to have to do because I just took about hours and hours of time. In addition to that, it's just a frustration of just dealing with this situation. So for me to calm down and just focus on other work, it becomes hard. Because it shouldn't be like this. These kind of errors are unnecessary. So there was another example of this happening where, a client was within one district. They moved from one location to another within that district. We did an AR-11, and then they moved outside of that district to a complete different district, and we're living there. We filed AR-11 for that too. Eventually, after a year and a half, the interview notice goes back to where the first original address was, not even the second place we moved it to. So I have to spend so many hours on the phone calling them to correct the situation, and apparently they say the phone systems are different. So I mean, the change of address is different. When you file an AR-11, that's a different system than the interview scheduling for appointments is for adjustment of status. And that doesn't make any sense that would be a different system. That's the case. But to fix it now, I have to spend an hour on the phone, probably more like 2 hours to get a hold of somebody and say, hey, that's not the address. Like, yeah, we have the new address on file. I'm like, well, then why do I have to be on the phone to fix this? Why can't you just do it on your own? And so these are the kind of issues that are very frustrating, and it just sucks time out of you. So CBP, the next thing on the line. Now, CBP had a very interesting lawsuit against them by ACLU because what happened is, and this is in San Francisco, which is surprising, but at the port there are CBP officers waiting outside an airplane when people were debarking, is that the word? Leaving the airplane. They were checking IDs, and that was against the law. It's a Fourth Amendment violation. They had no probable cause to be checking ID. And it was supposed to be voluntary, and they have to tell them involuntary. And ACLU was successful in having a settlement with CBP that they're going to change their policies and manual and training to say you can't do that. If you're going to be asking for IDs, you have to let people know that it's voluntary. But of course, people are going to be afraid to do that. So it's really up to us as lawyers, if we deal with that, to say no, it's against the law, really stand out there. But that was a very great win on planes, but this issue still exists on, Greyhound buses and stuff, that these, it's just unconstitutional, un-American to say, where's your papers? Is it just such a 1984 Nazi kind of situation? Regardless of what your opinions are about immigration, if you hate immigrants and hate the border policies, anti, left or whatever, checking IDs within the U.S. just goes against our DNA in the U.S. So that's a very horrible thing. And CBP, so many of them are patriots. I'm really surprised that they, despite what their animus may be towards immigrants, some officers, the Constitution and the oath you take is so much more important than all of that. So it's very shocking they did that, but it was a good win. I'm glad the ACLU pushed them on that. There's been another issue that's happening. I've seen, it always happens in threes when things happen, but people coming in the U.S. from the Canadian border or coming with the border crossing card and not getting a stamp in their passport, so not having proper proof of admission. For example, if they later want to change status or adjust status, and it pops up where we want to adjust status, the admission might be in the travel history page when you go to CBP's I-94 page, but there's no I-94 issued for BCCs unless they specifically ask for them, or if they're a border crossing card, or if they're coming from Canada. Some cases, the travel history will be enough, but some officers will not be satisfied by just the travel history, even though that's a record of admission, which is very frustrating. So a colleague got an RFE on adjustment of status because they only submitted travel history and didn't have an I-94 for a Canadian. But that's just not right. A Canadian doesn't get issued a 94, it doesn't go in the system. They have to specifically ask for one. But if they're going to adjust status because later on they decide to, it's not fair to hold them to that. They have a travel history, CBP, FOIA will probably bring it out, but it's going to take forever. The travel history on the I-94 site should be enough. And CBP in general, the news has been bad. Word got out that there's a Facebook page that some officers have that are just being, racist and against Muslims and stuff. And when you're in a position of authority like that, it's a horrible situation. But bigger than that in CBP, there's huge issues with getting people to stay, and a really big issue of mental health going on. Apparently, there's a lot of suicides that are happening, large numbers within CBP, and I appreciate that, and I feel for them because not every CBP officer, probably most of them, don't want to, be around kids that are coming through the border and they're through horrible lives and put them in cages. It's not something they want to do. It's one of those you're taking orders kind of situation, which becomes troublesome, and that's why a lot of them are leaving or having trouble with just functioning on this, or taking their own lives, unfortunately. CBP in May asked for additional $2.1 million for the agency's Employee Assistance Program, which provides counseling and other help to workers facing personal or job-related issues. So this is a very serious situation where we put these officers in a situation where they're getting crushed in the system because they're being told one thing to do. They see the results of the actions they do. They probably know there's better ways to deal with it, but they're getting crushed in the middle of this. So we have to have sympathy to what they're doing and really focus on pushing Congress to act on this, not the president, not through executive order. And this is something the head of ICE said, that the departing head of ICE had a big shouting match with a congressperson who was just bashing them. They said, listen, you have the power of the purse. You have the power of the legislature. You could fix this. And that really goes to the core of the issue of immigration laws nowadays. Whether you're on the left or right and you vote, and I've made my position on voting very clear, none of them want to fix the issue. They want this issue to exist. They like seeing kids die. Whether you're a Democrat or Republican, the leadership, both of them want that because they score so many points off this issue that there's no point in solving it. The worse it is, the more riled up the base gets on either side, the more money they can contribute, the more votes they get. So it's just not going to change, and that's what we have to push is the politicians getting points on this, and the officers abolish ICE, this and that. There may or may not be a point. There are good arguments for and against and different change get, but the core of it is we have to change our mindset to what we expect our politicians to do and our global policy is, because it is up to the legislature to fix this issue. And Democrats had the House, they had the Senate too, they had the president, and the porter in chief was there under President Obama. Nothing changed. Now Trump's here. He uses a lot of rhetoric, and he does crazy kind of things too. So he was constantly talking about, I don't tell my enemies about what I'm going to do before I do, I just do them. But then he goes ahead and announces well ahead of time that ICE is going to be doing raids everywhere, particularly if people have an absentia orders. Well, Well, if you have an essential order, what are you going to do? You're going to go to another friend's house to stay and just leave the house. How are they going to find you necessarily? Unless they spend the money and time to investigate and find you, you could just move. So it's like nothing is consistent in what the guy says, but it's just ridiculous how that's going. It scares the hell out of the population pointlessly going to do something like that. There's no need to declare a raid in that sense. They're ongoing at all times. Just by declaring it, that's just such a propaganda tool to cause fear. So when you constantly say these kind of stuff just to scare people to get them to do one thing or the other, that's a very dangerous thing. It's a very dangerous path we're going on. And, you know, internally, ICE employees are feeling the wrath of this too. There was a court case where ICE, their employees union, had sued the government, and I'll read what the article said, the synopsis, because ICE had changed how it calculated overtime payment for certain employees. The union filed a grievance alleging that ICE changed the policy without first bargaining. Now, ICE has its own union, so they have to do bargaining. But the D.C. Circuit agreed with the authority's determination that ICE has no duty to bargain with the union before changing its overtime policy because ICE's previous policy was unlawful. So they said that previous policy they had for overtime was unlawful, so there's no duty to negotiate. So they're screwing ICE employees, they're screwing CBP employees, putting pressure on them committing suicide, they're screwing the USCIS employees. So us immigration attorneys are frustrated, our clients are frustrated, but the people across from us that we're arguing with and having these RFEs, having these denials, having these things we're suing them on, they're going nuts too. I mean, DOS has gotten gutted, the State Department, embassies, they have less staff, so you know an under chief has to be the chief as well. One officer has to do a gazillion cases, just numbers just to get it through. So they're gutting it on every which way. It's an insane thing that's going on in the whole immigration system right now. You know, there's a Chinese proverb that says, "May you live in interesting times," and this is really it. But one aspect of it that's frustrating as it is, this is where changes happen. When it gets this frustrating, that's when people are motivated to make changes. And hopefully it'll be changed for the better, because it go both ways. But that's an important part of this podcast, is to get you thinking about all aspects of it and help me think out loud. Because sometimes I'll say stuff on this podcast because it's free willing. It's not, other than my notes of certain topics to talk about, I just say what's on my mind, which could be risky, but hell with it. And I hear myself, and I'm like, well, my subconscious was thinking about this, and I hear myself, I'm like, that's an interesting topic. I don't always even agree with everything that's said here, but it just really, you know, trying to be provocative for the sake of thinking things through. And that's the great thing about a long format discussion that is a podcast, because you could have real deep stuff, and that's what I always enjoyed as a kid. I hated watching these like snippets of stuff in interviews that didn't go anywhere. Even when I go to parties and stuff, I hated when I had to talk to someone for 5 minutes and leave. I try to take someone in the corner if they're good at conversing and spend like 2 hours going in deep and just zoning everyone out, because this is really juicy stuff that's really provocative, really takes your mind to the next level and can succeed. But going back to what we're talking about here, what is going to happen with the system, I don't know, but they're crushing everybody on both ends. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, one aspect is they probably want to just gut and destroy the system, but that's not a realistic thing either. So I don't know. It's madness. But to finish off discussing about ICE, you know, when in the last couple years, and I've talked about this and I've posted this before, ICE is spending a lot of money by developing technology systems that are way 1984 Big Brother systems. They have license plate readers they got from Paladin, Peter Thiel's company, to help analyze people's license plates. They have facial recognition that they go through DMV drivers databases that were just released to pick up on faces, to find the addresses of people that might be unlawful and stuff like that. There's really, you know, like crazy kind of Big Brother systems that ICE is developing. And so it's very risky, because they'll develop it under the auspices of, you know, people are illegal immigrants and we got to control this population, this and that. But that's very quickly going to be used for other systems. This is a test case. So again, when it comes to our personal liberty, the DNA of what it means to be an American, a patriot, that stuff is under threat. And so that's what we got to think about, whatever side of the spectrum you are. When we have these kind of systems where we're being using the excuse of immigrants to really just eventually crack down on the whole population, control them, because the way things are going, people are getting more and more frustrated. They have to really keep track of, you know, dissidents. And for me, I like talking about this stuff, and my advocacy is kind of different. I think in 100 to 1,000 year time span, so I don't really want to advocate any large movements even right now, even for people who have distress today, because these rapid movements cause a lot of problems. That's why I like talking about things, so I have in your head, so that eventually over time you or your kids, grandchildren do long-term change. That's my perspective on change. It's a 1,000-year time span. So 99% of the population or plus doesn't believe in that, or doesn't make sense, or sounds crazy, but I really think that long-term perspective is good, and that's what this talking about this stuff, almost an hour into a podcast, good, because people have tuned out already that are not into this stuff. And it goes to the hardcore audience that likes to think about these things a lot and see what we can do so our children's children is going to be in a better position. I don't think any rapid change is going to help things. So that's why I like talking about this. But it's really, this idea of dissidence and stuff, it's not me. My thing, again, going back to where I started is from, you need to make as much money as possible because that money will give you power. And you need to do it in the right way where you're not working 24/7, you're doing it on a part-time basis, creating money cash flow to have a orderly life within your life. It's controlled. You can help your family, be with your family, read books, have time to think, go on vacation so your mind can relax, and then do your advocacy that you need to do by picking the group you want to advocate for, groups, the programs you want to do, and focusing on long-term directions for those kind of things. So, I really enjoy education, so I started this podcast. I started teaching at law schools on a one-on-one basis. That training people in the Immigrationer's Toolbox is an emanation, the fruition of that, to have a centralized locations to help you make the money you need, have the skill you need to then take it to the next level to do the things you want to do, to live the lifestyle that you want to live. And that becomes so important. When you want to challenge this stuff, if you're bogged down on cases all day and trying to just make the bills, get the bills paid, you're not going to be able to talk to people about, well, are these decisions by the legislator correct or lack of decisions? Is CBP doing it right, even internally? Like, you should be going to all the CBP meetings you have and talking with the people there and say, well, how are you feeling? How do you feel about doing these kind of events? Like, these things you have to do. How much pressure are you guys feeling? Well, let's all work together. Maybe, talk to the Senate committee in charge of this and say, listen, yes, get CBP the help they need for mental stuff, but don't put this job in their hands. Don't give them the dirty work to do and then blame them at the same time as well. We all need to work together because, again, CBP, ICE, USCIS, they're feeling the pressure too. And when we're all feeling the pressure, that creates opportunity for us to put our hands together and work together on this stuff. And so we're not like all against each other. We're really for each other. Their job is dependent on the immigrant existing. If there's no immigration, they're going to be out of job. So they have this incentive as well. Their unions do, and they're willing to listen and talk to make a sane, rational policy. And so the unions, by suing, by having discussions with their collective bargaining units, they're showing the fact that they're frustrated too because they appreciate the fact that CBP is about customs and controlling the flow of illegal substances, illegal people, illegal activity. But they can't do that when they're overwhelmed because of policy decisions. Or ICE is when they have only so many people, but then Trump says we're going to deport 1 million people. It's just, it just puts pressure on people because they can't produce that. And with USCIS as well, with Department of State as well, with Department of Labor as well, OFAC and Treasury, and the myriad of agencies involved, everything needs to be rethought of, and the pressure needs to dissipate so people could do rational kind of stuff to pick out the bad cases that are fraud or all those kind of issues and just focus on what they need to give the benefits and keep out the people that the policy of this country is the legislative produce that you want. And do it in a logical way. So when you have this stuff, this 90-day rule stuff that's counterintuitive, doesn't make any sense, it gives full leeway to officers to do whatever they want. And it's not even that they do whatever they want, they think they might be reading one thing and they're doing 1,000 interviews a day. They're not going to have time to really sit and analyze the 90-day rules like I've been doing for years thinking about this. And so luckily I have Department of State viewers and I appreciate what you do. I've realized there's a lot of people in Department of State that watch this show and a lot of them later on go into private practice and they contact me. And I love all you all when you do contact me, I can tell you care about what you do. You're doing it because you enjoy it, you want to help people. But there's only so much you can do when you have an employer. And again, that again goes to the toolbox I talked about. Do you really want to have an employer? I realized I did not want. I wanted to live my own destiny. And whether it's the government being your employer or a firm being your employer, this isn't a lifestyle we need. Nowadays, in this new economy, this new world, having an employer is a risk because they can fire you at any time. Then you have to sit and go back to zero and develop your own business brand or have your hat in hand and try to beg for another job that's not going to pay well. But if you control your own destiny, you control your own levels of marketing and business development, you have those levers and you can pull them and get your own business, you're not dependent on anyone else other than hundreds and thousands of clients. So if 20% of those clients go away, it's not that much of a hit because you have it balanced. And that'll give you the time you need to develop relationships because human beings, our satisfaction comes from being an orderly life that's connected with other people. Even if you're introverted, shy, or stuff, that's depression. You have to, and this is from a person that's lived that life for almost all my life. You need to resonate with people, connect with people, and network with people any way you can. In this podcast, I'm talking to a camera alone in a room right here, but it's caused me to connect with hundreds of people. So many great people that reach out to me, talking to me from every aspect of the world, every aspect of these agencies, from lawyers, And you need to do everything you can to connect with other people, because that's what's going to save the earth and save our future and take us to the next level, the new evolution of abundance and people connecting together to rise. You know, like fission, if I'll talk about this in a different time, like the energy that comes from the fission of the sun as opposed to fusion, which creates a lot of energy but leaves a bunch of radioactive and deadly material out for everybody. We really need to focus on fusion to take things to the next level. So with that, I just want to remind you, the website Immigration Lawyers Toolbox is there. Email me at info@immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com to learn about the subscription system. Please join the LinkedIn page. I post a lot of information on there. It's not anywhere else, especially when I hear about job opportunities, which are just so many job opportunities. I talk about work for yourself, but not everyone can do that. There's a lot of universities that have clinics that are hiring right now, professors that they're hiring for right now, adjunct professors. Those are great opportunities to take part of. Teaching at a school is personally satisfying. It's a great marketing tool, letting people know that you work for a university, law school, they accept you. It means a lot, because when you're a professor, you got to sit down and know things properly, because you're teaching other people this stuff. So it means you've really handled the law well, and you know what you're doing, and you have to be the best you can be to be successful at that. So it's great, and something to do. Immigration Lawyers Toolbox LinkedIn page. And other than that, just stay in touch with me. I hope you all have a great one. Until next time, God bless. Bye-bye.